Here is the complete high-retention YouTube documentary script written exactly to your specifications. Nothing, that's the word. The single most dangerous thing you can say during a traffic stop. Not a slur, not a threat, not even a lie. Just nothing. And yet, almost every driver on the road today believes that staying silent is their golden ticket, their get-out-of-jail-free card. They've seen the videos, they've heard the so-called experts. They think that if they just clam up, the law has to protect them. But here's the reality that could cost you your freedom. In the first 30 seconds of a traffic stop, the wrong kind of silence doesn't protect you, it convicts you. Are you actually making things worse by trying to play it smart? And is there a single phrase, a handful of words, that once spoken instantly erases your most fundamental rights? In this video, we're going to walk through exactly what happens the moment those blue lights flash in your rearview mirror. We're going to show you the bizarre legal loophole that turns polite conversation into evidence. And by the end, you're going to realize that everything you thought you knew about your right to remain silent might just be a dangerous myth. Stick with me, because what you're about to hear involves a forgotten Supreme Court case, a routine stop that destroyed one man's life, and a single sentence that you must never ever say to a police officer. Let's roll the tape. Imagine it's a Friday night, you're driving home, maybe after dinner with friends, maybe just running a late errand. The roads are quiet, you signal, you stop at the lights, you're doing nothing wrong. Then out of nowhere, red and blue strobes flood your cabin. Your heart jumps, you check your speedometer. You're fine. You check your mirrors. You're not swerving. So why you? This is the moment where 99% of drivers make their first critical error. They start talking. They roll down the window and say, "Good evening, officer. Was I speeding?" Or worse, "I only had 2 beers." But you're smarter than that. You've watched the legal breakdowns. You know you have rights. So when the officer asks for your license and registration, you hand them over silently. And then when he asks the killer question, "Do you know why I pulled you over tonight?" You say nothing. You just stare ahead. You're exercising your Fifth Amendment right? Wrong. And this is where it gets strange, because in the United States, and in many ways similarly in the United Kingdom, the act of remaining silent is not the same as invoking your right to remain silent. That sounds like legal gymnastics, but it's the difference between walking free and spending a weekend in a cell. Here's the chilling distinction. The Supreme Court has ruled that if you simply stay quiet without actually telling the officer you are asserting your rights, that silence can be used against you in court. Let that sink in. Your silence, on its own, is not protection. It's a blank check for the officer to fill in the story. Think about that for a second. You're sitting there trying to be polite, trying not to escalate the situation, and every second you stay mute, the officer is legally allowed to interpret that as nervousness, guilt, or even an admission by omission. It feels unfair. It feels like a trap. And honestly, it is. But we'll get to the exact words that fix that in just a moment. First, we need to talk about the phrase that destroys everything. The one thing people say thinking it makes them invincible, but actually hands the police all the power they need. So what is the most dangerous phrase in a traffic stop? It's not a curse word. It's not, "I know my rights." It's actually a question. And almost everyone asks it. The moment the officer says, "Can I search your vehicle?" Too many drivers respond with, "Do you have a warrant?" And then something unexpected happens. The officer smiles, says no, and then proceeds to search the car anyway. Because here's the brutal truth. You don't need a warrant to search a vehicle during a traffic stop if the officer has probable cause. And by asking, "Do you have a warrant?" you just confirmed that you believe you have something to hide. Worse, you just invited the officer to articulate the smell of marijuana, or a bulge in your pocket, or the nervous glance you gave to the glove box. These are called articulable facts. And the second you challenge them with that warrant question, you give the officer the adrenaline rush they need to justify tearing your car apart. This changes everything about how you should think about police interaction. The reality is completely different from what you see in sovereign citizen videos online. You don't have to consent to a search, but you also don't debate it. You don't ask about warrants. You simply say, "I do not consent to a search." Those 6 words. That's it. No argument, no logic, no legal citation, just a clear, unambiguous revocation of permission. But here's the loop we opened earlier. If silence can be used against you, but arguing gets you in trouble, what exactly are you supposed to say? What is the magic spell that locks your rights in place without triggering an escalation? You are about to learn the single most important sentence you will ever speak to a police officer. And it's not what you think. Back in 2010, a man named Genovevo Salinas was questioned by police about a murder. He wasn't under arrest. He wasn't read his Miranda rights. He answered most of their questions voluntarily. But when they asked if a shotgun shell found at the scene would match his shotgun, he went silent. He clammed up. He refused to answer. At trial, the prosecutor told the jury that his silence was evidence of guilt, and the Supreme Court agreed. In a landmark 5-4 decision, the court ruled that because Salinas never actually said the words, "I am exercising my right to remain silent," or "I want a lawyer," his silence could be used against him. Let me restate that because it sounds like fiction. You can remain silent, and that silence can be used to put you in prison. Unless you speak up to say that you are remaining silent. That is the open loop. That is the hidden trapdoor in the floor of the American justice system. And it exists in a similar form in the UK under the Criminal Justice and Public Order Act, where silence before an arrest can lead to adverse inferences. So, what do you say? You say this: "I am respectfully declining to answer any questions without my attorney present." That's it, not "I plead the fifth," not "I want a lawyer." Those are close, but they imply you are already under arrest. The magic is in the words "respectfully declining." It's polite, it's professional, and it is legally bulletproof. Once you say that phrase, the rules of the game change entirely. The officer can no longer claim you are being evasive. You have affirmatively asserted your constitutional right. Every question after that, if they continue to ask, becomes harassment on the record. And here's the twist they don't want you to know. Most traffic stops end in less than 15 minutes if you simply shut down the conversation this way, because once you stop being a source of information, you stop being interesting. But wait, there's a catch, and this catch is why most lawyers don't teach this on TikTok. Almost nobody talks about this part. If you refuse to answer questions, you still have to perform certain non-dramatic acts. You have to hand over your license, registration, and proof of insurance. In some states, you have to perform a breathalyzer or risk an automatic license suspension. Refusing those specific administrative tasks is not protected silence. That's a violation of implied consent laws. This is the nuance that gets people arrested. They think, "I'm not answering anything," means they can just sit there like a statue, but the law disagrees. You can refuse to tell them where you're going. You can refuse to say if you've been drinking. You cannot refuse to identify yourself in a jurisdiction with a stop and identify statute. And you cannot refuse a lawful order to exit the vehicle if officer safety is cited. So let's close that loop. Silence is not protection. Invoked silence is protection, but invoked silence does not mean you ignore commands. It means you comply with lawful orders while refusing to answer investigative questions. That is the tightrope. That is the skill. And this is where the psychological battle really begins. Because the moment you say, "I am respectfully declining to answer questions," you will watch the officer's face change. Some will nod, "Thank you," and finish the ticket. Others will take it as a challenge. They will say things like, "Oh, so you have something to hide?" Or, "If you're innocent, why not just talk to me?" This is the test. This is the pattern interrupt. Most people crack here. They feel rude. They feel suspicious. They feel the social pressure to explain themselves. And in that 1 second of weakness, they say, "Well, I just meant I don't want to incriminate myself, but I guess I could tell you where I'm coming from." And just like that, the protection evaporates. You have voluntarily waived your invocation. Anything you say after that is fair game. The correct response to "Why won't you talk to me?" is silence. Or, if you want to be perfect, you repeat, "I am respectfully declining to answer any questions without my attorney present." You say it like a broken record. You bore them. You do not give them a story. You do not explain your reasoning because your reasoning is irrelevant. The only thing that matters is that you have asserted a right and you are sticking to it. Now let's talk about the other silent killer, literally the sworn statement trap. Some officers, particularly in the US, will hand you a piece of paper and ask you to sign a statement. They'll say it's just a formality. They'll say it's just to acknowledge you received the ticket. Do not sign anything without reading it. And if it requires you to say, "I swear under penalty of perjury," stop. Signing a sworn statement during a traffic stop is how you get charged with lying to a police officer. If there is any detail in that statement that conflicts with the officer's dash cam, you have just committed a felony, and the officer knows it. Never sign a statement on the side of the road. If they insist, you say, "I will be happy to sign that in front of my attorney." Now, this is another one of those pattern interrupts. It resets the power dynamic instantly. But let's take a step back. We've been talking mostly about the United States. What about our viewers in the United Kingdom? The rules are different, but the trap is the same. In England and Wales, you have the right to remain silent when questioned by police. However, under the Criminal Justice and Public Order Act 1994, if you remain silent during a police interview and later rely on a defense in court, the jury can draw adverse inferences from your silence. In plain English, if you clam up at the roadside but then say, "I wasn't driving erratically in court," the judge can tell the jury, "Hey, he didn't mention that to the officer when he had the chance. Maybe he's lying now." The same basic principle applies. Unexplained silence can hurt you. But in the UK, you do not have the same absolute Fifth Amendment protection as the US. You have a qualified right to silence. And the moment you say, "I'm not saying anything," you need to be absolutely sure your lawyer is going to explain that silence at trial. This is why the advice for UK viewers is actually more aggressive. In the UK, the smart play is often to give a no-comment interview, but to do so only after stating, "I am acting on the advice of my solicitor." This negates the adverse inference because you are invoking professional legal counsel, not just being evasive. See the pattern? In both countries, the critical element is articulation. You have to tell them what you are doing and why. Silent rebellion is a myth. Verbal assertion is power. So, let's close the final loop. The Supreme Court case, Salinas v. Texas. The man who lost everything because he didn't speak up to say he was staying quiet. The key takeaway from that case isn't that you should never talk to police. The key takeaway is that the legal system is a game of words. If you don't use the right words, the system assumes you are playing a different game. It assumes you are hiding something. It assumes you are afraid. And here is the most chilling realization of all. Police officers receive training in interview techniques designed to keep you talking. They use rapport building, flattery, even fake empathy. They will say, "Look, I'm just trying to get you home safe." They will say, "I already know what happened. I just need your side." These are psychological door openers. Every time you answer one of these friendly questions, you are filling in the blanks of a puzzle you don't even know they are solving. You don't know what the officer saw. You don't know what the dash cam caught. You don't know if the person behind you just called in a false report about your license plate. You are flying blind. And the only thing that levels the playing field is shutting up. But not the stupid kind of shut up. The intelligent kind. The documented kind. The kind where you say clearly, calmly, and politely, "Officer, I am going to exercise my right to remain silent. I do not consent to any searches. I will not be answering any questions without my lawyer." Then you roll up your window and you wait. This is the moment where the video usually ends, where the narrator tells you to know your rights and throws up a logo. But I'm not going to do that, because knowing your rights isn't enough if you choke when the lights are flashing in your eyes. You need a plan. You need a script. You need to have rehearsed this until it is muscle memory. So here is your takeaway. Your actionable insight, your call to action that isn't a call to action. Stop practicing the law. Start practicing the words. Record yourself saying, "I am respectfully declining to answer any questions without my attorney present." Say it until it feels boring. Say it until it feels robotic. Because when the adrenaline hits and your hands are shaking on the steering wheel, you will not rise to the occasion. You will fall to your level of training. And if you want to see more breakdowns like this, where we dissect the real legal traps that normal people fall into every single day, then hit that like button, not because I asked you to, but because the algorithm needs to know that this information matters. Because the more people who see this, the fewer people get trapped by the silence loophole. I also want to hear from you. Have you ever used your right to remain silent during a stop? Did it work or did it backfire? And for the UK viewers, has an officer ever mentioned adverse inferences to you on the roadside? Drop your story in the comments. Let's build a real-world map of how this plays out. Because at the end of the day, a traffic stop is just a stage. The officer has a script, the prosecutor has a script, even the judge has a script. The only person who shows up without lines is you, unless you write them yourself. I'm Narrator Name. Stay safe. Stay smart. And remember, in the eyes of the law, silence is not a shield. It is a question, and the only answer they want is the one you don't give them. See you in the next one.